Good morning, everybody. I'm back here in no man's land, and that's okay because we're still gathering together using all the technology that we have now, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, I think is what it might be called. And then you're still going to be able to watch this on the website anytime you want. But this week has really got me thinking about unity and how important it is to come together and to just worship. With everything that's going on, all this craziness and that we're supposed to just be quarantined and staying in our houses, it kind of takes away a little bit of our freedom, and you get a little cooped up a little bit and you start to go a little crazy. But today, let us just focus on this. Let us focus on worshiping God, because no matter what, He is still in control. And even though you're at your house, just say that with me. God is in control. Doesn't that feel so much better already? Well, let's dig into worship. Let's give Him the praise that He deserves, because no matter what, we're in His hands. He's taking care of us. Let's praise Him for that. God, I'm on my knees again. God, I'm begging, please again. I need you. Oh, I need you. Walking down these desert roads, water for my thirsty soul. I need you. Oh, I need you. And your forgiveness, it's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips. It's like sound of symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my skin. Dead man walking, let's sing together. Dead man walking, slave to sin. I want to know about being born again. I need you. Oh, I need you. So take me to the riverside. Take me under, baptize. I need you. Oh, I need you. And your forgiveness, honey on my lips. It's like sound of symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my skin. Let's repeat this part together. I don't want to abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me want to change. I don't want to abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me want to change. I don't want to abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me want to change. One more time. I don't want to abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me want to change. Your forgiveness is like sweet, sweet honey on my lips. It's like sound of symphony to my ears. Oh, it's like holy water. Your forgiveness is like sweet, sweet honey on my lips. It's like sound of symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my faithfulness. Oh God, my Father, there is no shadow of turning with thee. And thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. And as thou hast been, forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. And all I have needed, thy hands have provided. And great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter, springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. And all I have needed, thy hands have provided. And great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and peace that endureth, thy own dear presence to cheer and to guide, and strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings are mine, 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. And all I have needed, thy hands have provided. And great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Welcome to church. This is week 2 of our church doors being closed because of the coronavirus, but thankfully we still have this avenue to come together and worship. We still have this Facebook Live, this YouTube streaming thing that we can come together and still participate in corporate worship, even though we're not in the same physical space. One of the things we want to do to kind of help create that atmosphere of togetherness is by getting involved in the comments. So if you're watching this on a smartphone, a tablet, or even a computer, there'll be a comment section down below that's just going to keep going from everybody who's watching. If you want to share a story or a thought or something, by all means jump in. If you have any prayer requests, that's also a good place to put it so that we can all pray for you for what's going on in your life. So if this is your first time encountering Tollsboro Christian Church, my name is Rex. I'm the youth and children's minister here. Next week, our senior minister Lane is going to be starting off a new series, whether we're meeting physically in the building or if we're just doing this digital kind of worship service again, probably going to be that. But this week we are finishing up the series we've been doing all month of March called Life, the Wisdom of Proverbs. And we've been looking at making wise decisions in our lives. And we looked at wisdom at work, we looked at wisdom in our finances, we looked at wisdom in our marriages. And this week we'll be looking at wisdom as we raise our kids, as we parent. And now the first thing I want to do is I want to tell you guys a story. Now, growing up, we had dogs. You know, like most American families, we had dogs. We mostly had collies. For some reason, my parents liked collies. So the first dog they had was named Sandal, and it was a full-blown collie. And then we had mini collies. We had an English Mastiff in there at one point. But that's the kind of dog we had. And I think that comes from the Bob Evans Farm Festival. See, where I grew up in Gallipolis, that's where Bob Evans was from. He's actually from a small town next door called Rio Grande. But basically, Bob Evans, the guy who started the restaurants, eventually his farm became a corporate tourist kind of farm. And my uncle was the farm manager. And so every year, they would have this big festival on the farm. And the festival was amazing. It was something that my whole family looked forward to. We always attended. They had really cool things, like they had bluegrass and gospel concerts. They had cloggers. They had horse shows. They had all kinds of stuff. I mean, the food, oh my goodness, the food. Seriously, the food. That was reason to go right there. The apple cider, like we drink till we get sick. It was amazing. But there were two things I really, really look forward to every year. The first one was the lumberjack competition, because they'd have this group come in and they'd do the logs in the water where they try to like roll them and knock each other off, or do the axe competitions and the chainsaws. It was really cool. But the other thing was the border collie competitions. And what those were, if you're not familiar, was there would be these sheep inside this little fenced-in area, and there would be a pen in the middle. And they would have these border collies, the black and white ones, would herd them in. They would race to see who could get the sheep into the pen the fastest. And it was just unbelievable what these dogs would do. You know, the dogs acted like they didn't even need their master's commands. Like the owners would be sitting there clicking or hollering little yells and stuff at the collies, and they would instantly just change direction, and they would get these sheep into the pen. And so when I got a dog, obviously we got a collie. And I thought, you know what? I want my dog to be like that. So we got this little mini collie, a Shetland collie, and I went to work training it. I did everything I could to get this dog to train up. So I got it to sit, I got it to lay down, and I got it to shake. And that was it. Like, no matter what I did, I could not get this dog to train up beyond that. I couldn't even get it to housebreak. And so eventually I got fed up with it, and this dog became an outside dog. It became a dog that we had in a kennel outside, and the longer I would go in between giving her attention, the less she minded and the less she responded to my commands. Now, throughout this series, we've been looking at the book of Proverbs. And before we continue on, I want to make sure that we're all still on the same page about the context of that book, about understanding what we read whenever we read a proverb from that book. The book of Proverbs was written about 2,800 years ago by a guy named Solomon. He's the famous Solomon from the Bible. His dad was David of David and Goliath fame. And what Solomon did was he saw all the surrounding countries and nations collecting together wisdom of their peoples into these scrolls and books, and using that as kind of a textbook to teach people who would be serving in the government as judges, magistrates, court officials, scribes, those kind of things. Solomon saw that it was a pretty good idea, and decided to do it himself. And that's what we have as the book of Proverbs. It's a collection of proverbs, which are short sayings that express a truth. And there's some that he wrote, there's some that he collected and edited, there's some that later kings added that they found that Solomon had written, just didn't include in the book, and there's also some that other authors wrote as well. But that's what this book is. It's literally a textbook written by a king to people who are going to serve him, to make wise decisions. And so it's fitting that today, talking about parenting, the first thing we look at is probably the most famous proverb about parenting. It's Proverbs 13:24, and it says, "Whoever spares the rod hates his son, and he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." Spare the rod, spoil the child. That is a proverb that I knew before I even knew who Jesus was. I had so many Sunday school teachers and school teachers quote that at me. I don't know why they ever did that, but I remember it quite distinctly that verse was used in my direction quite a bit, usually right before I got punished. But I didn't truly understand that verse until I got a little bit older. See, I got that collie I talked about when I was pretty young, and I didn't understand what it took to truly train up that dog. And when I got older and a little bit smarter, and I looked back on how I treated that dog and how she turned out, I realized that it was because I didn't give her the discipline that she needed. I didn't give her the training, the attention, the discipline that she needed to become a truly good dog. And I'm a lot better dog parent now. I understand a little more. In essence, if you love your kids, you'll put the effort into making them good human beings. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of parenting, right? We want our kids to be productive human beings, good people who love God. That little goal of making your kids, raising your kids to be that kind of person, it's the hardest thing you'll ever have to do. It requires more work, more time, more energy, and more money than anything else you'll probably have to do. But that's our jobs as our parents. As parents, it's our job, it's our biggest responsibility that we owe to our kids, but it's also the biggest blessing we'll get. Raising kids, in my opinion, is the biggest honor a person can get. And that's not to say that kids can't mess up your plans, especially if they're unexpected, but that just means your plans get a whole lot better, at least if you ask me. See, our responsibility to our kids is to lay a foundation they can build their lives on. Now, it's important to understand what I mean when I say that. See, you provide the emotional, the moral, and the spiritual foundation for a kid's life. That thing that lies underneath what they build their lives on. You provide that. You aren't building their lives. They do that because it's critical to remember that they're human beings too. They can choose to reject the foundation that you give them. But if you don't provide it to begin with, it makes it so much harder for them to find something to stand on. And so that's why in the book of Proverbs, we can find chapter 22, verse 6, which says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it," only to be countered by Proverbs chapter 1, verses 8 and 9, which says, "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching, for they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck." See, fun fact about the book of Proverbs and Proverbs themselves, they're not laws. They're not commands. They're nowhere in the book of Proverbs that I'm aware of. It doesn't say, "Thus saith the Lord," or "Jesus said to do this." There were no commands in it. They're just wisdom. They're truths. And which is why Solomon can warn children to remember their parents' teaching. See, it's implied that the teaching was good. And then on the other hand, promise that a child, if they're taught right, if they're taught the things that matter, they won't depart from it. It's not that kids can't depart from it. Those two things don't seem to go together, but the reality is people can make mistakes. People can choose to do the wrong thing. And what's important is that you lay the foundation that your kids can stand on even when their lives get messy, even when they made the wrong decision, even when they get lost themselves. See, that gift of laying the foundation for a kid's life is not only a gift to them, but a gift to the world, because the world desperately needs more good Christian people. But obviously, kids can reject that. Kids don't have to embrace what you teach them. But if we don't try, there's no chance that they can at all. So we try, and it takes intention. It takes purpose. It doesn't happen by accident. And I know that in the 2 years, 9 months, and 25 days that I've been a parent, I've already failed at this so many times. So I know I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here by saying we need to be intentional about it. There's so many times that I've just been tired or just selfish and not used an opportunity to pour into my son's life. But that's okay, because if you look at the math, there's always another opportunity. It's never too late to start. And so it's important that we stay intentional about getting involved in our kids' lives, that we stay intentional about investing and laying that emotional, spiritual, and moral foundation to their lives. And we don't realize how quickly that time can go away, though. You know, the church, we use this thing called the Parent Q app. It's a partner app with a curriculum that we use for children's church and the youth lessons. And what it does is you plug your kid into it, and you put in their age, you put in their grade, and it essentially has a countdown timer at the top of your child's page in it. And that countdown says how much time you have left until they move on till they turn 18. And as terrifying and sad as that little countdown is, it's a really strong reminder to use your time wisely. Well, let's think about this in a different way. Let's just look at the math. Some people are math people. I am not. But some people, they need to see the numbers. Let's say your child spends an average of 15 hours a day awake, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I know that's not normal, but let's just, for math's sake, let's say they're awake 15 hours a day. At 7 days a week, that's 105 hours that your child is awake every week. School takes up 35 of those hours, but that's okay because you work 40 hours a week normally. You're left with 65 waking hours that you have with your child. That's 65 hours that you can invest in. You can invest in their spiritual health, you can invest in their emotional health, you can invest in that moral compass and setting it in the right direction. Now, if you take them to church, every time we're open, that's 4 hours out of that 65. Now, when they're here, you know, we're teaching them about God. We're teaching them who Jesus was and who Jesus is and what he did, and that God loves them, and trying to show them that we love them, to answer questions, to spark their curiosity, to explore the Bible, to invest in all these things that are important in a kid's life. But 4 hours out of 65 is nothing. That's 6% of that time. The rest of the 94% is up to you. And that's why it's so important that parents get involved. That's why we push things like the Parent Q app, so that you can see exactly what your kid learned, and it provides you with things to reinforce that lesson throughout the work, things to talk about at the dinner table, or maybe games you can play, or little lessons you could do with your kids. You know, that's why we send home those sheets after every single Sunday school and children's church class. It's because it's so important that you spend the rest of those 65 hours investing it with your kid. And that's why we also use the Right Now media, which right now during the coronavirus situation is so incredibly useful. The timing couldn't have been better on that. It's kind of like God knew what he was doing when he put this into our laps when he did. You know, Right Now media is another way to get the message of God and that Jesus loves your kids in front of their faces. And that's what you're fighting against. We live in a world where if you don't stay intentional and stay informed about what is laying that foundation to your kid's life, something else will. You know, a kid with a smartphone or a tablet or a computer can see things that can't be unseen. They see things that are so damaging to them, even in places that you wouldn't think that they would be there. And that's why it's so important that we as parents are intentional and we stay informed about what our kids do online, about what our kids are seeing, what our kids are thinking and listening to, because you have to invest in those 65 hours. And I'm not a surrealist or whatever the right word is there. You know, I live in reality. I know you're not going to spend every minute of those 65 hours investing in your kids. But it's important that you stay intentional about it. That's what I want you to get away from this first part of the message today, is to be intentional. You know, it's be intentional about spending time with your kids and investing in them, looking them in the eyes and talking to them, teaching them, which might be a little intimidating. So what I want to do with the rest of our time is look at some things that are important to teach your kids. A lot of what you teach your kids will just come by example. They'll see you living your life. They'll see you the way you handle situations, and that'll be what sinks in. But there are some things that you need to spell out, some things that need to be said to make sure they understand these truths. So we're going to look at a few of these truths to finish out today's message. All right, so let's get into this. Our first one comes from Proverbs 1:7. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." Fear of the Lord is the bedrock that we lay our kids' foundation on. Fear of the Lord is essentially teaching them that everything that they have is a gift from God. From the air that they breathe, to their health, to the bed they sleep in, to the food that they eat, to the sunrise and sunsets, to the ability to play sports and all the things that they love, that those are gifts from God. And so it's important that your kids start to see how much God provides for them and how much we rely on Him. And that's something that you can just point out as you go through the day. As your kid eats, make sure you pray together. And when you pray, thank God for your food. Just point out things that are gifts from God so your child can start to see that God loves them and that He provides for them. The next thing comes from Proverbs 29, verse 25. It says, "The fear of man brings a snare, but he who trusts in the Lord will be exalted." This one kind of goes hand in hand with fearing God. It's the polar opposite. We have to teach our kids not to fall into the trap of peer pressure. And it's something that's really easy to fall into, especially middle school and high school kids and even younger kids. But there's all those pressures to be popular, to fit in, to make friends. Peer pressure is something that even adults can fall into. And so it's important that you teach your kids that God's opinion is what matters most. That it doesn't matter what the other kids say, that it doesn't matter what other people think about you, as long as you're true to yourself and you know what God thinks about you. So the first one was the fear of the Lord. The second one is to avoid the fear of man. Our third thing to teach our kids comes from Proverbs 16:18. It says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling." See, God has a pretty strong opinion about pride, and if you read much of the Bible, you'll probably come across it. He don't like it. He's not a fan of the proud. He's not a fan of the arrogant. But it's important to teach your kid the difference between good pride and bad pride. Good pride is taking pride in your hometown, taking pride in where you're from, or taking pride in the work you do and the effort you do. That's a good pride. That puts you in a place where you can be proud of your accomplishments, proud of things that you've done, of working hard. That kind of pride is healthy. The bad pride is the kind of pride that leads to a point where you think you don't need God, where you think you're self-reliant, where you start to think the things you have are because you earn them, not because God blessed you with them. So it's important to teach our kids to stay humble, to always be humble, because that arrogance, that pride, that'll be a real snare for them the rest of their lives. So it's important that we teach our kids to stay humble. Be proud of the things that are right to be proud of, but don't be arrogant. Always rely on God. Always remember that He's the one who gives you the things and the abilities to do what you've done. So that brings us to lesson number 4. And it comes from Proverbs 18:10. And it says, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runs into it and is safe." We'll call this one, "What to do when life gets messy or scary or uncertain." Because your kid will run into that. And right now might be a really good time to use this lesson, to bust this proverb out. Because everything in your kid's life during this whole COVID-19 crisis has changed. They no longer go to school every day during this time. Their parents, you and your wife or your husband might be laid off. That everything in their life is changing. They're not seeing their friends like they used to. It can be terrifying. And then they hear on the news or hear parents talking or their friends talking about this disease and how they might catch it. And it's just a really terrifying time to be a kid if they're at the age where they can pay attention to it. And so it's important that you tell them who God is. That you tell them that He's the God who created the whole universe. And that even though that there are bad things that happen, He's still behind the scenes. And He looks at your kid and He says, "I know your name. I love you, and I've got you." That nothing can take your child from His hands. That He has them, and He'll always have them. That no matter what happens in this life, God still has your kid, and that He will protect them, and that He will love them no matter what. Make sure your kid knows that, especially right now. That as things get scary and uncertain, God still has their back. So let's recap real quick. We've gone over fearing the Lord, avoid the fear of man, always be humble, and trust the Lord when life gets scary. And the last lesson we're going to look at comes from Proverbs 4:23. It says this. It says, "Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life." Teach your kids to protect their hearts. You know, the world will do its best to twist and distort and corrupt and destroy their hearts, to make it into something that God doesn't want it to be. As parents, we have to be more watchful than ever, like I mentioned earlier. You know, what is available to a child nowadays, even accidentally, when there's no ill intent or bad behavior involved, what they can accidentally see nowadays is worse than any generation has been able to in recent history. It's what your kid can be exposed to is awful, and the predators that are out there online and the dangers of just how connected we are in the world is more present than ever. So it's our job to protect our child's hearts. What they see, what they hear, what they read, we have to teach them to protect themselves, because there will come a time when you no longer protect them. They have to do it for themselves, and it's your job to show them how to do that, to teach them that just because you can look at something doesn't mean you should. And so it's your job to teach your kid to protect their hearts, because from it flow the springs of their life. From it flow everything else in their life, their mental health, their spiritual health, their moral compass. All of it comes from the condition of their heart. And so it's important that we as parents build the foundation that they build their lives on and protect their hearts. And so, closing today's message, I want to encourage parents that right now maybe your kids are home from school and you're stuck home with them, and I just want to encourage you to hang in there. Use this list of 5 things and spend one day this week just going over them. Ask your kid if they have any questions. Ask your kid if they're scared about anything. You know, ask your kid if there's anything that they're worried about. Be that strong tower for them. Show them that God cares about them and that He loves them. And we're praying for you as a church family. And so what I want to do as we close out, Jake's going to lead us in some worship. I want you guys to list some questions or maybe some helpful tips down below in the comments to share with each other's kids. What are some things that your kids have said that they're concerned about? What are some helpful things you've told your kids to help them get through this time?
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song, worthy of every song we could ever sing, and worthy of all the praise we could ever sing, worthy of every breath we could ever We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. And Jesus, the only one who could ever save. And worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will